Good morning, and thank you for attending my defense today. My name is Jihye Baek, a master's student in PUPA under Professor Ini Kim. Today I will present my study titled How Age-Related Constraints Reshape Transport Disadvantage in Dynamic Railway Information Systems. Evidence from Virtual Aging Simulation. And this presentation consists of 6 parts: introduction, literature review, methodology, result, discussion, and conclusion. And first slide is research background. South Korea is entering a super aged society at a much faster rate than the global, and older adults with physical limitation experienced cognitive difficulties at nearly twice the rate of those without physical limitations. This suggests that physical limitations in older adults may also contribute to increased cognitive difficulties. At the same time, railway stations are becoming increasingly important mobility hub for older adults. As shown in the middle figure, rail accounts for 43.7% of long-distance public transportation use among transportation vulnerable groups. Meanwhile, transportation environments are evolving into dynamic information environment in which real-time information is continuously updated. In particular, railway stations function as multimodal transfer hubs, requiring users to search for and process dynamic real-time information. And according to the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport, the accessibility compliance rate in urban railway stations reached approximately 92%, and information and guidance facilities show a lower compliance rate of about 72%, indicating a gap of 20%. This suggests that information accessibility has received relatively less attention compared to physical accessibility. At the same time, information guidance systems such as this large-scale departure board and on the right side and still play an important role in railway stations. Although digital guidance platforms such as KORAIL are expanding, but large-scale departure information boards may remain more important information source for older adults with limited digital accessibility. However, aging-related physical and visual decline may increase difficulty in processing dynamic information. Despite this issue, the nature and extent of these difficulties remain unclear. And based on literature review, this study was structured around 4 key perspectives. First, previous transport disadvantage studies mainly focused on physical accessibility barriers. And second, railway stations are complex dynamic information environments designed mainly for average users. Third, information search can be understood as embedded information acquisition, meaning that movement and information processing occur together. Finally, previous older other studies mainly rely on survey or interview, making it difficult to capture real-time behavior. And this study identified 4 gaps. First, limited understanding of information-based mobility constraint. Second, need for more inclusive dynamic information environment design. Third, limited evidence on how age-related constraints alter movement information coupling. Last, methodological challenges in older adults behavior research. Based on these gaps, this study established 2 research questions. First, how does user behavior change during railway information search under aging simulation conditions? Second, how does cognitive load change under these conditions? And what implication does this have for current railway information environment? And next, this slide presents the overall analytical framework of my study. And this study employed a within-subject design in which all participants completed both the normal and age-related constraint conditions. And the independent barriers consist of age-related physical and visual constraints. A total of 41 participants performed a platform identification task in a VR-based lesion station environment. Behavior and cognitive measures were analyzed using Wilcoxon sign length test. And next, I will explain the virtual railway station environment used in this study. The experiment was conducted in a Unity-based VR environment modeled after main information search area of Daejeon Station, and the environment reproduced key spatial elements related to information search behavior, including board placement and working route, distance, or surrounding station facilities. And in addition, under the aging simulation condition, Unity-based visual effects were applied to reflect representative age-related visual characteristics. These effects were designed not to exactly replicate older adults' vision, but rather to simulate major visual characteristics associated with aging. And the VR departure information board was designed based on real board, and it displayed departure time and train type and number, destination, platform number, and delayed information. To reproduce a dynamic railway information environment, 3 board pages were automatically updated every 7 seconds, and participants were required to search for the target train information and identify the corresponding platform number. As shown in the lower right figure, participants specifically had to identify the track number, which corresponds to the platform number of target train. In addition, a total of 12 train scenarios were randomly assigned across trials, and different board contents were also used between the normal and aging simulation conditions to reduce running effect. And next, I prepare a short demonstration video to help illustrate the experimental environment in this study. As shown in the upper part of the video, the participants' virtual environment's view is presented and under both normal and aging simulation conditions. The lower part shows the actual experimental demonstration during locomotion, and participants work through the station environment and check the departure information board. And following the experimental demonstration, I will now explain the overall task flow and experimental scenario. Here, page 1 and 2, and participants work along a straight path, a blue path, along 2 major baseline working speed, after which target train information was presented on page 2. And at this stage, and the platform in page 3, the main platform identification test was conducted. Participants worked towards the departure information board while searching for target train information. Finally, here in page 4, participants selected the correct platform number from 4 randomly assigned answer options. And based on task scenario presented earlier, this study analyzed various behavioral and cognitive response measures, and locomotion behavior was analyzed using Unity positional log data, and while gaze behavior was analyzed using eye tracking data. And in addition, viewing distance, spatial gaze distribution, and pupil response and post-test questionnaires were analyzed to examine information processing demand. Finally, all comparisons between conditions were conducted using the Wilcoxon sign length test. Based on these experimental measures, I'll now present the main results of study. First, this slide shows changes in locomotion and task performance under aging simulation condition. Here, on the left side, the manipulation check results show that working speed under both conditions remained within a corresponding reference range reported in previous studies, supporting the validate of the locomotion manipulation. On the right, the task performance results show that total task duration, moving time, and stop time are significantly increased under the aging condition. In particular, stop time showed a larger relative increase than moving time, suggesting that participants spend more time pausing during information search under aging-related constraint. Additionally, platform identification task failures occurred only under the aging conditions. And next slide presents changes in board viewing behavior under the aging simulation. First, on the left, target page dwell time significantly increased under the aging condition, while overall dwell time did not show significant difference. This suggests that participants spend longer viewing the specific page containing the target train information under aging-related constraint. On the right, the research shows board update cycle extends behavior, as shown in the figure. Approximately 51.4% of participants exceeded the 7-second board update cycle under the aging conditions. In addition, about 27% of participants shifted from successful test completion within the cycle under the normal condition to cycle exceedance under the aging condition. These results suggest that more participants experience difficulty completing information search tests within a single board update cycle under the aging simulation constraint. And this slide presents changes in board viewing distance and gauge concentration under the aging simulation conditions. And first, on the left, both closest gate distance and peak gate dwell distance decrease under the aging condition. As shown in figure, participants approach department information board more closely when searching for information under aging condition. On the right, spatial variance decrease under the aging condition, both target page and overboard page conditions. This indicates that participant gaze become concentrated within narrower regions of departure information board, and together these results suggest that participants adopt compensatory viewing behavior, such as approaching the board more closely and concentrating visual attention with a smaller area in order to process information under aging simulation. Finally, this slide presents cognitive response changes and under aging simulation condition. On the left, subjective cognitive load measures showed increase across all questionnaire items under the aging condition. Task difficulty shows the largest increase, followed by fatigue or confidence loss, attention difficulty, and visual burden. On the right, mean pupil diameter also significantly increased under the aging condition. Together, these results suggest that participants experienced higher cognitive burden and information processing demand. Based on these findings, this study provides several discussion points and practical implications. First, under aging-related constraint, participants showed compensatory behaviors. However, despite these adaptive behaviors, cognitive and information processing demands still increased. This suggests that behavioral compensation alone may not fully resolve information accessibility difficulties in railway environment. In addition, the results suggest that transport disadvantage should be expanded beyond physical accessibility to include information accessibility. Although participants could still physically navigate the station environment, processing dynamic real-time information itself became more difficult under aging-related constraints. Based on these findings, this study proposed two main design implications. First, from a temporal design perspective, the current 7-second board update cycle may not provide sufficient viewing time for some users. In particular, more than half of participants exceed the update cycle under the aging condition. Second, spatial design perspective, the results suggest the need for more inclusive information environments, such as designated information checking zones near department board. As shown in the previous result, many participants stopped and moved closer to the board under the aging condition. Finally, this study also has several limitations and future research direction. Because the experimental applied aging simulation to young adults with a VR environment, further validation using actual older adults is needed. And in addition, the proposed design implications, such as longer display cycles and information checking zone, required further real-world validation. Finally, the VR-based aging simulation framework developed in this study could also be extended to other transport environments. And finally, I would like to conclude by summarizing the key contributions of this study. First, this study suggests that information accessibility should also be considered as a form of transport disadvantage beyond physical accessibility barriers. Second, this study provides quantitative evidence that age-related constraints increase difficulty in dynamic railway information search. Finally, this study proposed a combined VR and aging simulation framework for analyzing age-related mobility behavior in dynamic transport environment. This is reference. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.